I look at it as an investment in your health. And so many people are taking, hundreds of dollars worth of supplements to the point of, I don't know what this does, right?
Yep.
And this is
Yes.
really targeting one of those root causes of aging in all of your cells.
Today's guest, this is going to be very interesting because a lot of you are asking about the longevity and wellness space. And in all reality, there are so many different avenues that you can take. So, we've had just Dr. Addison on regenerative medicine and the total full body stem cell makeover. We've had a Dr. Adil Khan. We've talked about, we've had a bunch of different experts on regenerative medicine. It's no doubt that we all want to live a longer and healthier life while looking great, staying young, and we're always trying to find answers to both skin health and longevity. And with skin being the largest organ in our body, obviously it requires a lot of energy. And we have to combat not only environmental factors, but ultimately toxins that we take in through our diets and everything else. So the big question is, how can we keep our skin cells from running low on energy and showing signs of aging? And luckily for you today, we have an amazing guest by the name of Jennifer Scheinman, who's a registered dietitian and nutritionist, and also the senior manager at Timeline Nutrition. And this is a company that first introduced a powerful postbiotic that's on the market that's been proven to re-energize cells and muscle recovery. And stay tuned as we discuss Timeline and their powerful postbiotic Urolithin-A in supplement form. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to be here and share a little bit about my journey, kind of getting to be a longevity expert and how that sort of stemmed from my expertise in nutrition, and then how that even wrapped up into skin. And, I think you sort of really made a critical point, right? Is that we want to look our best. And I hear this so often is like, I want to look on the outside like I feel on the inside, right? Everybody's
Amen.
taking such good care of themselves or trying to do their best in terms of like eating and exercise. And they want to look outside how they feel inside. So, I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Well, listen, it's so interesting because I look at the amount of supplements in one hand that I take in the morning and I'm saying, all right, it's so funny because a new supplement will come on the market. We'll say, oh man, there's some data. A lot of these are epidemiological studies and they're not cause and effect, but there's a lot of science behind some of the new supplements that are out there. And we've FDA and their supplement division on the podcast in the past, and we've kind of talked to them a little bit. I'm so curious today. We know that as you age, your skin cells and all the cells in your body really lose their power. I mean, ultimately, that's mitochondrial effect, and we don't necessarily know why it happens, but we've got some ideas. And so, can you go more into depth and explain to our listeners exactly what cellular health is and why it's so important?
So here's my view on cellular health and why it's important. So, the way that sort of medicine has evolved, and I think it's sort of re-evolving now, is where we've come to this very organ-centric approach to health, right? If you have something wrong with your stomach, you go and you see a gastroenterologist. If you have something wrong with your skin, you go and you see a dermatologist. And cellular health is in my view, taking a step back to a more holistic view, and that we are really trillions of cells, right? And regardless of whether it's a stomach lining cell or a skin cell, or, a muscle cell, they all need key nutrients. They all need certain things to help them thrive and do their job of whatever that cell's job is.
Sure.
And when you sort of take a step back, there are these 12 hallmarks of aging. And in fact, this was a paper that was published, I want to say it was like January 2023, and it was actually a revamp of a paper that was published 10 years ago. And it identified these biological processes that cause our cells to age. And again, it doesn't matter which organ the cell is in. And it was republished just last year because they actually added 3 new hallmarks to this. And these are the hallmarks that really drive longevity science and understanding why, to your point, like what causes us to age, what causes chronic conditions to develop, why some people get them earlier than others, and then what are interventions we can do to maybe reverse, but at the very least, slow down some of these biological
halt the progress.
Processes. Yeah. And, of course, living a longer life is great, but I think what we all really want to do is live a healthier life, right? Like, how do we make all of those years that we live as healthy as possible, where we can do the things that we want to do. And that's really what I think of as sort of cellular health. And then that extension of cellular nutrition is, how do the nutrients that we eat interplay with all these biological processes within our body and help? As I said, certain things we do can speed up that aging process, and certain things that we do can potentially slow down and halt some of that aging as well.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because, I guess one of the main topics that I wanted to talk about, obviously, was Urolithin-A. But, to take a step back first before we discuss that, how do you feel that Timeline addresses the cellular health decline to promote a healthier cells in your body?
I'm going to actually start first with something that I just wanted to bring to the attention that you talk about, with this handful of supplements that we take every morning, and sort of knowing what is this doing? What is the research start? And I've been a dietitian for over 20 years, and I joined the team at Timeline because I have never seen a supplement company address science the way that Timeline is doing that. And that was really important to me. And I think we're really raising the bar on the way that supplements are marketed, produced, tested. So
interesting. I love it.
Timeline, their parent company, really launched over about 15 years ago, and it was really more of an R&D company trying to really come up with almost a biotech approach to the way they looked at food components and nutritional compounds, and how almost apply the same level of science that you might even expect out of a pharmaceutical company, right? As you start to do all this rigorous research, find out if it's safe, find out if it works, and then launch a product to consumers. And that's exactly what happened. And they identified this molecule called Urolithin-A. And I know that's a mouthful. So Urolithin-A directly targets a few of those hallmarks of aging that we just mentioned, and mitochondrial decline being one of those. So those energy centers of our cells, you had alluded to that. We need ample energy, whether it's a skin cell or a muscle cell, for those cells to do their job. And those energy centers decline as we age. And so Urolithin-A directly targets that hallmark of aging.
Let's take a step backwards first on Urolithin-A, because we call it a postbiotic. And I know everybody's heard of prebiotics, but kind of go through the difference between a pre and postbiotic and why this is so beneficial, because obviously Urolithin-A is a postbiotic.
Yep, it is a postbiotic, exactly. And you're right, I don't think most people know what that is. So most people are aware that gut health is critically important to our health, right? And that it impacts systems in our body besides just the direct impact that it has on gut. And one of the reasons is these molecules that the microbes and the bacteria in our gut produce. So I like to explain it to my patients in very simple terms. We give our gut microbiome, we basically give them room and board, right? They get to live inside our intestines, our large intestines. They eat the things we can't eat. So fibers and a lot of these polyphenolic compounds, those are a lot of the plant chemicals in some of our foods that we eat. When we can't digest those and use them to our own benefit, they digest them, and then they pay us in these postbiotic nutrients. And so people who are very in tune with gut health might be familiar with things like short chain fatty acids. Butyrate, for example, is one that's been getting a lot of press lately. Even vitamin K, that's a postbiotic, right? And we're learning more and more and more about the critical importance of our gut, because they create these postbiotic molecules that we then get to use for our own health. And Urolithin-A is exactly that. It's a postbiotic molecule, so we don't get it directly from food. But when we eat foods like pomegranates, berries, and nuts, there are these polyphenolic compounds. They're called oligotannins. We don't digest those, and our gut microbiome does, and it converts it into Urolithin-A, and we get to reap the benefits of Urolithin-A.
Amazing. Can you kind of talk about, if we look at Timeline and kind of tying it into the broader conversation about muscle endurance and overall well-being, can you talk about kind of the latest studies involved in this, as well as even immune health?
Yeah, so this all ties back into that mitochondrial decline. So when we think about what Urolithin-A does, it triggers this process inside our cells. We have a cellular recycling process of our mitochondria, and it's called mitophagy. So if your listeners are familiar with fasting, right, they probably have heard that term autophagy. And so they're very familiar with that sort of innate anti-aging process we have inside of our bodies where we can, take dysfunctional and sort of broken down cellular components, recycle them and create new ones. And that's what mitophagy is. It's just very targeted to the mitochondria. And Urolithin-A is a potent inducer of that. So when we think about our cells that are highly energy dependent, like our skin cells, like our muscle cells, if we can optimize that mitochondrial turnover, we then have basically more youthfully functioning cells, right? They're functioning with more energy like they've done before. And that's really where the muscle story came. So Timeline started their research really in the muscle arena, because we know the muscles are so dependent on energy from the mitochondria. And the research there has been really exciting. So the first trial that they did in the muscle space was using muscle biopsies. And they found that after just 1 month of taking Urolithin-A as compared to a placebo, we saw that there was better mitochondrial health. There was more robust turnover in the mitochondria. And that essentially we looked at, these were in 70-year-old sedentary adults, and we made their muscle mitochondria look very similar to active 70-year-olds without even changing their exercise or their diet. So the next question really became, well, okay, so what is that going to do in terms of health outcomes? And so we looked at 2 separate studies. One was in middle-aged adults and one was in older adults. And the studies were designed slightly differently, but the key hallmarks and things that we saw coming out of that were these vast improvements in markers of muscle health. So we saw improvements in things like muscle endurance, improvements in muscle strength, even other markers like VO2 max, those were improved, or a 6-minute walk test, like how far can somebody walk in 6 minutes, and saw improvements that were clinically relevant in these types of populations as well. So that's really where the muscle story came from and what we're seeing in terms of results.
Yeah, listen, I mean, sarcopenia is which essentially is muscle wasting, is something that we deal with as we age. And a lot of that leads to further bone breakdown and things like that. It's gradual deterioration. In fact, follistatin levels, which, follistatin is a protein that ultimately gives you the ability to develop lean muscle mass. We lose follistatin as we age. And so, we need as much help as we can get. I know that there are other different components. When we look at how Timeline is also dealing with immune function and things like that, what can you tell us about that as far as how, some of these products can improve your immune function and why? So
it all, again, goes back to that Urolithin-A and mitophagy optimization. And so that's where I think people can kind of make that leap and start to understand how a molecule like Urolithin-A is beneficial for a muscle or an immune cell. So our immune cells get exhausted as we get older as well. They start to lose energy from mitochondrial decline. And we know, right, as people get older, they're much more susceptible to disease, right, to infections. Like the flu is obviously much more, concerning for somebody who is, a senior citizen versus somebody who's younger. We also know that their response to vaccines are not as good as they're older. And we also know that cancer, that also becomes, there's a much higher risk. Age is like one of the worst risk factors for developing cancer. And a lot of that is tied to all of those hallmarks of aging that I talked about. And one of those hallmarks is mitochondrial decline. So we have been studying, most of the studies were really first done in mouse models, looking at sort of these mouse models of colorectal cancer. And that's really where you want to start with these molecules, right? You want to look in animal studies because, these animals live short lives. You can, manipulate things. And we were seeing some really promising results there. And we just completed actually our first clinical, so human trial, looking at Urolithin-A in humans in terms and lots of markers of healthy aging.
And sorry to interrupt you. I want our viewers and listeners to understand that this is a supplement that they are doing human clinical trials on, because most supplements don't have this level of science behind it. So sorry, keep going. I just wanted to point out the importance of that.
No, and thank you, because that exactly is part of why I joined this team. This is something what we don't see very often. And in fact, I was just at, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, the American Academy of Immunology. They have this yearly conference where they're highlighting, the latest research. And this is a very, very high level, highly scientific, highly medical focused conference. And the fact that we were there presenting research was, you don't see that. You really don't see that. And it was funny because even as I was talking to a lot of the researchers there, they were even confused. Like they were like, wait a second, this isn't about a mouse study. This is about human studies and you're a supplement. It was very, very mind blowing. So that study that was presented was by a partner out of Germany, out of the Frankfurt Cancer Institute. And he was looking, as I said, at these different hallmarks of immune aging. And so as I mentioned earlier, our immune cells become fatigued. We start to lose some of these powerful lymphocytes, which are the early scavengers of, infection and cancerous cells. And what he found was that after just 1 month of 1,000 milligrams of Urolithin-A, what he saw was that there was this robust improvement in our T cell count and also an improvement in the mitochondrial number and the mitochondrial turnover that was happening inside those cells. And then other markers, I'm sure your audience is very familiar with like inflammaging, right? This like chronic
the new trigger word
that happens as we get older, which is really tied to immune function. And so we looked at some serum markers also of inflammaging, and those also were reduced, which we've seen that as well in some of our muscle studies. When we look at, C-reactive protein, for example, we see that that's reduced.
It's interesting when we look at traditional medicine and how we have different branches of medicine and how each one treats a different body organ system and things like that. Truthfully, it's very archaic because what we're slowly finding out is that there are cellular components in all organs. Our body is essentially one organ with, trillions of cells that are ultimately working together. And, some organs may fail, sooner than others, but ultimately it's one entire system. It's an ecosystem that ultimately, I feel like if you replenish or replace some of these things that are lost, ultimately, and this is the concept of regenerative medicine. This is why, cellular therapies are so popular right now. You do have a product, it's called Mitopure, and kind of go over the vision, how, this was originally created. Obviously it's Urolithin-A, but, I don't know if there's anything tied to it, but the original vision of Mitopure, how it's doing on the market, why it's, superior, and what patients should be looking for. Let's say, when they're evaluating a particular supplement, and Mitopure is one of them, and kind of discuss why, what points this particular supplement has that people say, all right, well, I can trust this.
So I'll start first with just kind of how the concept came about and where it's kind of been going. I think we're exceeding even our own expectations, because it's just when you approach the market with such rigorous science, people are excited about that because it's new. It gives them a sense of empowerment and trust that is, the supplement industry, there are some amazing players in there, and then there's a lot of snake oil. And so the fact that we can kind of like break through that noise, I think, is just a testament to the incredible research that was done. And really the concept originally, as I said earlier, was just to create a company focused on good, sound science that really can impact people's lives and have really a substantial, change in what they're doing, and where they really can feel it. And that's the feedback we get from our clients, nonstop, is just how they actually feel taking this. They're noticing these vast improvements. So that's sort of the first part. And then, just as you're evaluating, and this is sort of my dietitian hat I'm putting on now, as you're sort of evaluating supplements and what to take, I think the first thing you kind of need to do is really first assess, like, why are you taking it, right? Like, it's so funny. I have so many friends that are like, I don't know, I just heard some podcaster say I should take this. And I'm like, you have no idea what it does or why you're taking it, right?
Definitely.
And so then you can start to get this handful of very expensive supplements that you may not need, may interact with other supplements that you're taking. And so it's really kind of evaluating, like, what are the goals you're trying to work on? What do you need? And then starting with foundational things. Like, you can't, first of all, you shouldn't approach supplements until you're taking care of nutrition, sleep, stress, exercise. And that's not to say that we all can't use some help. As I said, I've been a dietitian for over 20 years. Behavior change is really hard.
Yes.
And so there's a great place for supplements to help people as they are starting to kind of layer in these behaviors. But you've got to look for things that have quality, and you can look for third-party seals. So for example, all the Timeline products are NSF for Sport, which is a very high caliber third party, basically saying like professional athletes can use these. And so that's a great certification. USP is another one that you'll usually see that seal on quality supplements. And Clean Label, that's another one. Timeline's also FDA GRAS certified. So there's quite a few different certifications that we have. And then looking at the science. So what supplement companies tend to do is two things. They come up with these proprietary blends where you don't know how much of an active ingredient is in there. So they might have, like, let's say it's a stress-reducing proprietary brand, and they might have things like L-theanine or ashwagandha that have great clinical studies around them, but you have no idea how much is in there. And is there enough to be active? And there's no law that says they have to tell you how much is in the proprietary blend. So that's the one thing. And then what a lot of companies do also is they do the reverse of what Timeline's doing, is they put a product together, they go to market, and then they put some clinical data around it, right? They're using sort of already, like, we know there's all these great benefits of vitamin C. Let's pull all that data. Let's mix it with zinc, and let's see if we've got an immune boosting product. Let's send it out to the market. So those, and you can always, feel empowered to write. And this isn't just for like supplements, right? This is for any product that you're using, whether it's food or it's a new mattress, right? It's like write to their customer support and ask for details about how they test it, what kind of claims they make. And they give you a sketchy answer, probably sketchy product.
Yep.
They are proud of what they put into their, their product development. They're going to share that with you.
Love that. And that's great advice, because there are so many companies out there that do, put something together and throw it out in the market. So, do your due diligence, make sure you need it in the first place. But I want our viewers and listeners to know that sometimes listening to a podcast, just because there's an athlete that's taking a particular supplement that works for them, it may not work for you. Or you may not require it. And there's different reasons for taking these things. And I think that sometimes with all of these wellness and longevity podcasts, the supplement list grows, but no one, as you mentioned, no one knows why they're taking them. Let's say, what is the just for the consumer, what is the price of Mitopure? Let's say, I need to take Mitopure, Urolithin-A, 2 pills a day for 30 days out of the month. What is the average cost for something like this?
So our studies, let's start first about dosing, because then that will kind of inform around pricing. So our studies looked at both 500 milligrams and 1,000 milligrams. We have two dietary products on the market right now. Both have the exact same 500 milligrams of Urolithin-A. They have the same cost, the same bioavailability. It's just a different method of how people like to take their supplements. So we've got a soft gel, which is, just as you imagine, it's this red, almost looks like a fish oil, that sort of size, that sort of consistency. And then we have a powder that you can mix. It's a more of a food-based approach for people who already are taking a handful of supplements and don't want to add anything more onto their stack. And so you can mix that with like a smoothie or yogurt. And they're both the same price. So there's no benefit to one or the other than your own personal preference. And those are sold in 500 milligrams. So it's 2 soft gels or one in these little individual stick packs. I think I actually have one on my desk, or I thought I did. But it's a little stick pack. And so both of those are 500 milligrams. And those retail, if you do a subscription model, for roughly about $100 a month. So obviously, if you
which is actually it's a reasonable amount to improve your cellular senescence. I mean, your mitochondrial activity. The idea is, if we can prevent, the idea, everybody wants to feel younger and ultimately look younger. And I think $100 a month is definitely something that it's almost an all-encompassing. It may replace some of your current supplements. Yeah,
I mean, that's my feeling on it as well, is that with the science backing of this, and I should also mention there's like a fantastic safety profile around this molecule as well. So in both our clinical trials and in, the thousands of people who are taking it now, right, we haven't really seen adverse events, interactions with other medications or interactions with other supplements. So it's very safe. But yeah, I mean, I look at it as an investment in your health. And so many people are taking, hundreds of dollars worth of supplements to the point of, I don't know what this does, right? Yep. And this is really targeting one of those root causes of aging in all of your cells. So this isn't something that stays localized to just your muscles. As we've talked about, it's immune health. There's some interesting preclinical data looking at it in brain health. Even, believe it or not, things like reproductive aging. So women's ovaries are the fastest aging organ in our body. And the eggs have, they're one of the most densely populated with mitochondria. So the implications of this, when you go back to that cellular health and those, thinking of the foundation, that's why, to me, this makes so much sense.
Let me ask you, for some of the viewers and listeners, they say, all right, look, $100 a month might be a little too much because they're already on 6 different supplements and it's tipping the scale. You had mentioned earlier, obviously, we can get some of this from our diet. What would you recommend, being a registered dietitian and nutritionist, what would you recommend for the average individual? Let's say they go to the grocery store or the market. What can they pick up to improve their Urolithin-A levels?
So that's a hard one because it actually depends on your gut. So the dietary precursors, if you have the right gut, which we'll jump into. So the dietary precursors are pomegranate juice, some berries like dark skin berries, raspberries, strawberries, and nuts like pecans. So it's not a lot of things that people are eating on a regular basis, especially not on a standard American diet. And the other thing is that we have actually done testing, and only about 30 to 40% of the population has the right gut microbiome to make this. So even if you're eating those foods, if you don't have the right gut microbiome, chances are you're not making it. So there's sort of two things to think about there. And even, we've done some testing on people, to find out if they're producers of Urolithin-A. And, we've had some of our docs that, they do all the things to optimize their gut health, and they're still not producing Urolithin-A because there's certain things, like I know myself, I was a bottle-fed baby, I was C-section baby, I was given antibiotics, I was very young. And so there's just some harm to my gut microbiome that no matter how much fiber I eat and probiotics I take, it's just never going to recover. So it's really one of those few things that it's hard to rely on diet alone. And the other thing is, if you wanted to get the same 500 milligram effect, you'd have to drink 6 cups of pomegranate juice a day. And that is something I would
cost prohibitive.
never recommend, right? The sugar alone probably would do more harm to your body than, than the benefit of the Urolithin-A. So this is one of those rare things where, a supplement is meant to supplement the diet when diet can't be enough. And this is one of those areas where I think supplement really has to be, the main way to do it. Because even if you can make it, I don't want you drinking 6 cups of pomegranate juice a day.
Definitely. And this may be, we had a previous podcast with Dr. Adil Khan, who's a regenerative medicine doc. And we also talked about FMT, which is fecal matter transplantation. And that's where you had mentioned, kind of going over having the right gut in quotations. That's actually giving you the right gut. So you could potentially have that treatment and then use some of these foods to help you. One of my last questions, I think, would be, many people for a long time, a ton of people have listened to David Sinclair. We know True Niagen. We've heard the difference between NR and NMN as far as also improving mitochondrial health and activity. What is your take on, let's say you're already taking True Niagen, and this is nicotinamide riboside, which ultimately is a precursor to ATP, but we're altering the energy levels of the cells. What if someone's already taking that? Would you recommend adding Urolithin-A or essentially supplanting it with Urolithin-A?
So here's how I think of mitochondrial support. I think of it in 3 buckets, right? So there is it's called mitochondrial biogenesis, or the creation of new mitochondria. And if you think about mitochondria as like a factory, right? So this is building new factories. Then you can make those factories work better, or you can protect them. And so that's sort of like mitochondrial efficiency. And then when those factories start to break down, you can tear them down and then help build new ones, right? And so there is a place for all 3. And a lot of these mitochondrial support, like NMN and NR that you mentioned, or even some other things like CoQ10, for example, they work on the mitochondria in different ways. So they have different roles. And just like all things, right, there's not a one-size-fits approach for everything. Now, the way I view it, though, is if you can't clean out that junk drawer, right, if you can't get rid of those dysfunctional mitochondria, even if you start building new ones and you start trying to protect those ones, it's still a crowded house. So I think of Urolithin-A because it's actually the only molecule that has been proven in humans to stimulate mitophagy. So some of those other things, like I know Dr. Sinclair talks about resveratrol a lot, we haven't seen the evidence yet in humans. So I think of Urolithin-A as sort of that foundation for mitochondrial health. And then those other things, absolutely, you can layer those on top, help build new mitochondria, protect those ones that you're making. I think they make a really beautiful synergy together.
Amazing. Oh, listen, I definitely have been educated. I know that our viewers and listeners have as well. I thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. For those of you out there that are listening or viewing this, where can they go to get more information?
Yeah, so you can go to timeline.com. So that's our website. That's where you can purchase product. We have right up on our website, easy for everyone to see all of our published clinical and preclinical data. So if you want to dive into the research, it's there for you. And then of course, like all the social media channels, so Instagram, Timeline, TikTok, all of those places you can kind of go and learn more as well.
Amazing. Jennifer, thank you so much for spending your time with us. If you like this video, you're going to love this one.
Yeah, we can be proactive and get this in the hands of people all around the world, prevent the loss of nitric oxide production. And the science tells us that if we can prevent the loss of nitric oxide production, we can prevent a lot of age-related chronic disease.